guys. Thanks a lot for joining in. I'm Chitransh. I'm one of the co-founders of GoComet. So today we are having this webinar focused on sustainability. And over the years, sustainability has been it's been a buzzword. It's been a very misused kind of a word. So today we've got some real practitioners from the market who have dabbled with sustainability across their entire careers and who have been facing this as a big change in their lives on a day-to-day basis. Towards the end of this webinar, our key takeaway is going to be that to develop some sort of a framework for sustainability. There should be some practical frameworks for sustainability that you can involve and integrate in your existing supply chains or operations or cultures. So that's the intent, everyone. And let's try to make it a little more interactive. Feel free to ask any questions if you have. You can just put all the questions in the chat, and then we have a team who will pose this question to us, and then I'll ask it to everyone. While you ask the question, please feel free to mention the speaker that you want the question to be specifically asked with. So that's it, guys. Hope you have a good time. And thanks a lot again for joining in. So I'm going to quickly introduce the panel. So first I have Saurabh. He's the head of APAC investments at Maersk. Hi, Saurabh. Thanks a lot for joining in. Then we have Nidhi, who's the co-founder at Portcast. Hi, Nidhi. We have Raj. He's the VP of Global Demand Planning and Logistics at Glenmark Pharmaceuticals, India. Then we have Rod. He basically leads growth at HubTran, and he was the ex-MD of Asia at Tech Global. And then we have Alvin. Hi, Alvin. And he's the co-founder at Haulio. So thanks a lot, guys, for joining in. So the first question, let's start from the basics, right? How do you define sustainability, and what does sustainability mean for each of you? So probably let's start with Saurabh, right? So what is it for you and how do you define it?
So for us at Maersk, sustainability is more than a buzzword. It's more than a department that we have, a sustainability department. It's largely what we call fully integrated with our business, right? And we know that 2020 has been a very unusual year for us. Right? It has really kept us on our toes on a daily basis, on fighting fires all the time. And on top of that, for the last couple of years, we have been very busy with a major transformation, one of its kind in many years in the organization. Even in this environment, sustainability is something that remains as part of our agenda. And why is that? It's because it's integrated with our strategy, right? We are, and again, as you rightly said, Chitransh, right? Sustainability can be many things, right? And that there is no one definition of sustainability. And then that's why we are constantly discussing our sustainability agenda, and it is evolving as we speak to our stakeholders. And among these stakeholders are our customers, our investors, our employees. So there are many dimensions of this sustainability, but one major dimension which has emerged as a top priority for us right now is really about stepping up our efforts on decarbonizing the logistics, right? And I'm happy to get more into this specific topic because this is really truly close to my heart as well, because we all know that climate change is here, right? And while we can talk about the 2030 targets and 2050 ambitions and so on, but our life will change significantly if we don't do anything in the next 10 years. This is the decade for action for that, and hence we have decided to accelerate our efforts on decarbonization. Besides this, there are several other dimensions of sustainability that we work with, and especially related to responsible business practices. These are mostly around our values, our commitments. What are the expectations that we are setting for our stakeholders. These include dimensions such as safety, diversity, and inclusion. You would have, how do we do ship recycling? There are many dimensions along with that as well. So all in all, sustainability is a pretty wide topic with a few few of the things that we are, we are addressing all of them. We have targets across all of them, but there are some of these which will be very, very critical for not only our company and our stakeholders, but the entire world.
Makes sense. Thanks. Raj, what about you? What does sustainability mean for you? We can't hear you. Your mic is off.
Thanks, Chitransh. So yeah, I agree with you, Saurabh, your comment. Sustainability obviously means many things, right? Are we creating a business? Are we doing business for a business group in a manner which is sustaining in the long run, right? Having minimal impact, right, on the environment, having a business model which is sustainable on its own without having to create any additional disturbances. A business model which is resilient, right? Not having to disturb more than what it was. And this was more profound in the last 1 year, right? Especially for us, where our manufacturing footprint is located concentrated in India, but our markets are spread out, right? When freight got challenged, air freight got challenged, we immediately had to pivot and start looking at how we will do that. And one of the big beneficiaries is Maersk, I can say that. Okay. But at Glenmark, we are very serious about this one. We take sustainability extremely seriously. In fact, we are one of the top 15 companies which feature in the Dow Sustainability Index from pharma space. Though we are not in the top 15 as far as other parameters are concerned, but sustainability parameter is something which is very close. We have been able to make positive difference. And there are a lot of things which the organization as a whole tries to do, right, to help improve, right? And good thing is, what you do on sustainability and impact on the bottom line go hand in hand for us, right? They're not at loggerheads with each other. For example, right, over the last couple of years, we were able to switch out of wooden pallets for our international exports completely, right? So there's no more wood used. We use slip sheets completely, and that has taken away our dependence on wood. We have been working on projects which densify our products, right? Like, for example, on a pallet, if previously we were shipping about 300 kilos and we were charged at 350 or 400 kilos because of the volumetric and gross weight combination, but we have worked consciously and reduced this one. So what it did do, it reduced the amount of space we took on the planes and the containers, and our products started to take much less volume when we transport them, right? We also have consciously taken an effort to reduce the dependence on air freight. Again, this is something which has got direct impact on the bottom line, right? So the last few years, we have been able to put our processes, systems in place to pivot and to come back to less than 15% of air freight, which is a significant thing coming from the generics space. And when you look back at it, obviously, sustainability was one of the things, not the only thing. But when you look back at it and see the impact it does, well, it has got profound impact on sustainability as well. And that's something which gives us a lot of satisfaction that we are able to contribute to this element as far as our business goes, right? I think this is something which we have very close to our heart, and this has been the core of our principles of doing business as well. Right?
Makes sense. Makes sense. So now, like Nidhi, what are your views on sustainability?
Hi, Chitransh. At Portcast, we predict how cargo moves across the world on oceans and also ships. If I think just about shipping, shipping as an industry contributes to almost 3% of the global CO2 emissions today. And I read somewhere that if we do nothing, by 2050, that would amount to 17% of the global CO2 emissions. That is a drastically high number. I feel like even though we're in a tech company, each one of us has a role to play in terms of how we can impact that number and bring it down. There is, and sustainability goes at multiple levels. First of all, you need that visibility of where that CO2 emissions is being spent, in order to then take the second step of being able to optimize that. And that optimization could come just within that particular industry, like ocean freight, or it could have sort of knock-on ripple effects on other parts of the supply chain, like air freight, like Raj mentioned, or other modes of transport. And then once you start optimizing that, there would still be certain CO2 emissions that you can't take away. And that brings other aspects of sustainability about carbon trading, etc. But I think, the numbers point in itself that, there is not an option of not doing anything, and it is critical, especially if we think about, how we're looking at the world, and if we want that world to be still there in that same form for our children and the next generation. So I think it is our responsibility that we do something about it. So, and I think the industry that we're in terms of, shipping or supply chains in general, it is critical. We've seen with the last year how important supply chains are, and it will continue to be global. And it just means that we need to find optimized manner of moving cargo from one place to another, have that visibility of true CO2 emissions, and give that visibility to every party in the ecosystem, so that each one of us can play that role in driving down the numbers. Ultimately, I do believe, organizations are profit centers, and sustainability needs to have an impact in terms of how it impacts your bottom line. So every single thing that we do, it needs to have an impact in terms of, moving the needle for a business. And, that's something that we kind of endeavor to at our company as well, to help customers on.
Makes sense. Thanks. Rod, what are your views? You have in a lot of years of experience across freight forwarding, tech companies. So yeah, would love to listen to you as well on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, in its purest sense, it's meeting our needs without compromising the needs of our future generations, our kids and our grandkids, and their ability to supply their own needs. And it is a daunting thought. We see different things that happen in the world, and not just the CO2 emissions, but different activities. And I think we're all probably concerned about, what will it be like in 50 to 100 years? What is our social responsibility? As we've talked about technology and the supply chain, and while we're not physically cutting down anything and building anything or manufacturing anything, we're making software that will then help our customers to reduce their carbon footprint, to do business in a more efficient way, to have more optimized routes for their trucks and their ships and planes, to better load configuration and optimization, which then drives down fuel consumption, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to help as many businesses as possible to save money, and then spend some of that money in different techniques and different activities to support sustainability, and at the same time become more efficient within themselves. And that's one of the reasons why I was interested in HubTran and moved from WiseTech to HubTran, because they have a business that was invented 5 years ago or designed 5 years ago purely to cut down on paper usage and people's time wasted handling paper. We had freight forwarders who were printing documents out because they weren't all in one shipment. They would then, after they printed them on the printer, they would put them back on and scan them, they bring them back in. I mean, complete waste of resources, time, effort, absolutely crazy. So, we said, hey, we can invent some software that will handle that automatically, and not one piece of paper needs to be printed, right? But as we know in the freight forwarding industry, everything's based on paper. They say it's digitized, but it's actually just a PDF. So, I hope one day that it does become fully digitized, and we stop our reliance on paper. We become more and more and more efficient, because there are so many avenues for efficiency improvement, especially in the business that we are in. So, I look forward to that.
Thanks. That's very interesting. So I think someone who can talk a little bit more on that is Alvin. They are very digital as a transportation company. So yeah, Alvin, over to you, man.
Yeah, hey guys. Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. Guys, I feel very happy to be here. I think it's really well done, the whole GoComet team, to be able to bring this all up. So I'm Alvin, co-founder and CEO of Haulio. Haulio, we are Southeast Asia's fastest growing and largest container trucking platform, and our aim is to sort of be a digital haulier per se. And I think what sustainability essentially means to us as a trucking business, it's basically, for lack of better word, we are like a Uber or Grab for container trucking, right? So if you think about it, we are trying to maximize and sort of maximize resources by reducing carbon footprint, from a trucking standpoint, right? Being more efficient for trucks to be deployed so that we don't have empty mileage and empty miles running around. So I think on that note, what sustainability essentially means for us is we are actually helping the entire supply chain from a trucking angle to reduce that carbon footprint. I am quite happy to hear, Saurabh, sorry, I from Maersk, I actually had a chance to speak to the MD of Maersk for the region quite recently, and I think he really echoed what exactly you mentioned, that sustainability to Maersk as such a big shipping line, it becomes a part of you. And I think I'm one of the young, I think Nidhi and myself are younger startups in this space. We feel that as startups, there's a lot of things, GoComet as well. What we are trying to do here is to sort of bring innovation to the space, but I personally think that sustainability, it's everyone's efforts, and to some level of degree, the giants like Maersk should lead the way. And I think it's very encouraging to see how Maersk is leading the way globally in terms of putting the money where your mouth is, in terms of and I think Nidhi mentioned about having sustainability being a top, it has to bring value in terms of bottom line costs, etc. I'm of the view that it takes a while for that to come after. The value has to be invested from the earlier days, and it's heartening to see the big folks, the big giants like Maersk taking the lead on that front. So I think to Rod's point earlier, and I think that's something that I think there was a very good point about going paperless. I think so many trees have been sort of burned for many decades because our industry is just so pen and paper. And I think I really can relate to that because I think in Thailand, where we started our business, as much as we would like, our technology is available for us to be 100% digital. Singapore, we are a startup that is backed by PSA. PSA is 100% digital, no paper whatsoever to go into the ports. But the unfortunate truth is that the rest of the region in Southeast Asia has so much papers to gate pass, exchange, documents and stuff like that. I think in freight forwarding, that's what you guys know. So I think that really is what sustainability means to me personally as a founder, and also being someone in the industry. I think like as a startup, that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to make a difference, helping truckers to be reducing their carbon emission, reducing carbon footprint. I think that's really what we are essentially trying to do.
Thanks a lot, Alvin. So let's change gears a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about the financial implications of sustainability. So over to Raj, your point. So you talked about the financial implications, how it impacts bottom lines, and I would like, Saurabh, your views on that as well. Like, how does it impact bottom line, since you guys are running huge organizations? So yeah, Raj, I think we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. For us, as I said earlier, right, they're not at loggerheads with each other, right? Sustainability and the bottom line impact, right? So they go hand in hand. Yeah. It depends how you see it, right? There are times when you want to invest something, but then you at least want to see returns on the investment that you did. But for us, nature of the business we are in, we are focused on looking at the cost at every element, right? So that comes very naturally to us. So everything that we do there has to be an immediate impact on the bottom line. It cannot be we keep investing for the next 2 years or 3 years, and then we will hope to see some benefits coming later. So that drives us big time. So in this process, the way the whole culture is set up in the organization, we're allowed to challenge everything inside the organization. Like, for example, the product design, the packaging design, the way it was done many years back when sustainability, the cost was not a major impact. It was designed very lavishly, right? With big boxes going across the world, and the big boxes, cost of logistics at a handling point meant more than anything else, right? So what we had done over the last couple of years is to challenge everything that impacts the cost, right? To densify the product, to put more product on a pallet, to change the box dimensions, to reduce the air inside the product, right? To look at how we do our entire planning process to reduce the dependence on traditional ways of shipping, right? To reduce the amount of inventory that we carry. All of these things have a very, very positive impact. In fact, we actually start to set benchmarks as far as air freight is concerned from India to US lanes, and also the inventories that we carry. When you reduce inventory, you reduce the warehousing space. and you have a positive impact. And especially in pharma, the cost of everything is multifold as compared to other industries.
Yes.
Right? Because of the regulations, because of the way the whole industry is set up, right? So every impact, every change that you make, it has got that big an impact on the sustainability as well as the cost, which is the reason why it's very exciting for us to look at it from that perspective and go invest. I can give you a lot of examples. We really took some of the handling agents head on. Like one of the airports in India, they were not happy to invest in something for us, right? But then we went ahead. We had to really do a lot of tweaking, testing, pushing around, and eventually they came around and they started to invest. But the investments were not big. It's just that mindset. This is the only way we can work. This is the way we have been doing it for many years. But when we sat down and we peeled the onion and showed them the benefit, yeah, then they realized, yes, there's something for us to gain for both of us. So they also benefited because they handle lesser cargo, but lesser cargo in the sense number of handlings are fewer. But at the same time, it's much better for them in terms of the revenues because they can do more throughput in the same capacity, what they have. That's how it's really, really encouraging for us to sustainability and cost go hand in hand. We are going at it much more aggressively now than ever before. Thanks to the crisis, what we had, the whole capacities available were challenged. Shipping lines are helping by pushing the rates up, etc. Okay, so we are forced to look at other ways to deal with it.
Yeah, makes sense. And Saurabh, same question for you. What are the financial implications? And also, please add, like, is it viable for smaller enterprises to go and make that shift in sustainability right now? Financially viable. That's what my point is.
Yeah. So I'll start from the longer term and then come to the shorter term implication of things, right? So as more research goes into things like climate change, right, we are realizing as human beings, we are realizing that there is a cost to climate change.
Yes.
Right? And there are some estimates I was reading that India's economy would have been 20% bigger if we didn't have climate change, right? So there are real implications of climate change, and because of that, the governments around the world are actually going and also changing regulations. We have the Paris Treaty, we have the infrastructure bill in US. China has come up with their own ambitions. So all the governments are setting up the framework. This is by itself, this framework is not going to change things. But what it does is that it reduces the risk for companies to go and invest and promote and even promote these investments to go and change the status quo, right? So that's with that in mind, we see that if we take money and invest in vessels, they may not give you a return in the next 5 years. But if we have to be ready for something which is as ambitious as entire fleet being zero carbon by 2050, then it becomes imperative that we have to start now. And that's why we have to start delivering in the next couple of years, right? Now, coming to the shorter term impact of things as well, right? So what we are also seeing in the market is that because of how we are seeing this as I mentioned, that how we are seeing the cost of it as humanity, there are many of our customers who are asking us to change, who are forcing that change almost, right? So they are looking for solutions that reduce their carbon footprint. And so we tested this. In fact, actually, one statistic comes to mind, which is like we did a assessment of 90 of our top 200 customers have very, very significant sustainability agenda when it comes to decarbonization. Now, if 90 out of your top 200 customers wanted, it's something that you have to invest in. You can't really get away from it, right? And that becomes then quite imperative for us to do it. We tried this eco delivery. Maersk Eco Delivery. It was a pilot that was launched 1 year ago, where we used biofuel instead of the regular fuel oil. And we were not sure whether are there customers willing to try it out. But they were pouncing on it. There was the customers really would like us to try out these things that help them reduce their carbon footprint. So if there is a market that is willing to pay a little bit more, if it helps them reduce the footprint, then it absolutely makes business sense for us to keep innovating on that front. And to your question on smaller players on this, right? It's something that a shipping company cannot do alone, right? If a customer is looking for an end-to-end carbon neutral supply chain, we only control the shipping leg. Then you have the trucks, then you have the rails, then you have the warehouses, then you have all these things that we don't always control, and hence it has to work hand in hand as an ecosystem to really deliver these solutions for our customers.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So what I'm hearing is that there is an in general consciousness about sustainability in the top market and larger conglomerates. I would like to understand from Alvin, Nidhi, and Rod as well, like what is stopping the industry to kind of make that shift, right? Because what I'm hearing is that it is financially viable if you look at a longer term. It is obviously very, very important for our existence as a human race. So what do you think is still stopping the industry? Alvin, we can start with you. Hi, Alvin.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, sorry. I just unmuted myself. Wanted to hear Rod's view first, but okay, I'll go first. But I think the industry in general, I think for sustainability, at least for the trucking standpoint, what we are seeing on the ground essentially is that they have other priorities. They feel that I think it's a general mindset shift that to some level or degree, it's not only just in supply chain, but globally. People generally think that the environment is just way too big, and it's no one's duty to sort of do that. And what effort can one person make? So I think from a supply chain or logistics industry standpoint, it's the same, right? I think for truckers, essentially they have way too much or many problems that they have on a day-to-day basis that such a thing does not really it's not so that important for them. I think survival right now today is more critical. I think right now, at least on the ground for a trucking standpoint, the real reality is that we have shortage of containers. We have shortage of drivers. I think these are some of the more key critical things that affect the day-to-day running of a business, fulfilling customers' requirements. So I think they know what's going on, but I don't think that to be my earlier point about the responsibility, they don't think that it's actually their role to play to sort of take up this angle on sustainability. So they will, coming from a smaller mindset thinker myself, I used to be a trucker as well. I think the smaller players will just rely on the bigger giants and the folks like Maersk to sort of take the lead first and then adopt a more wait and see mindset. This is what I think.
Makes sense. Rod, over to you. What does you deal with this probably on a day-to-day basis?
So, in listening firsthand and talking with customers, etc., but also, reading about what some of the researchers and some of the academic organizations have talked about. If we accept the fact that 90% of the world's businesses are small to medium enterprises, so they're not going to make a massive impact by themselves. It has to be led by the big guys. Okay. If you also consider that there's like 8 industries around the world that are contributing more than half of the carbon intensive global supply chain issues, right? And they include stuff that we deal with every single day: our food, maybe not construction every day, but food, fashion, freight, household consumer goods, electronics, professional services, automotive. Those 8 industries alone are providing or contributing more than half of the world's carbon intensive supply chains. So it must be driven from the top down. And in fact, if they have the right programs in place and they involve their suppliers, especially with their the weight that they have with their suppliers, because you take a car company, motor vehicle company, with thousands of small suppliers underneath it. If you do it right and launch the right programs and make it easier and even give incentive for not only the suppliers but also employees to encourage that kind of certain behaviors, etc., you will make a change. We will make a difference. And it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg to do that. But it must be top-down driven. It must be driven by the big guys, and give the right incentives to the small guys, because basically the small guys do what the big guys say in terms of supplying goods and services and parts, etc., for a finished product. So it needs to be top-down driven, absolutely. And if it's done right, and some of these reports have some really easy to follow actions and procedures that can be taken that would not actually add a whole lot of cost to the whole supply chain. In some cases, maybe 1 to 4% of end consumer costs. But we know, and we've seen, particularly in younger people, they're very cognizant of what's happening in the environment, etc. And they're okay to pay a little bit more for, an organic this or recycled this or something like that. They are not opposed to paying to help support sustainability. But the point is, it doesn't need to cost an arm and a leg, and we can do it with the right programs.
Makes sense. Nidhi, over to you.
But I actually fundamentally believe that optimizing the supply chain will have automatic replications or impact on sustainability. I believe that the first thing that any company, small or medium or large, needs to do is just get visibility on it. Know how much CO2 emissions, what kind of footprint they have, what kind of what is the status of their current supply chain, let's say. Only once they have that, and then they start thinking of optimizing the entire supply chain, will they be able to see the impact on making it actually sustainable. But again, like I said, it needs to have that bottom line impact. Let me give one example concretely. So we deal with movement of ships and how early or late ships arrive, and how that impacts not just the ship, but any container on any particular ship across the world. Almost half of the ships, about 48% of the ships, arrive late by more than 12 hours. What this means is that the truck may be idling, the truck may be waiting at the port. It means that the shippers, if there is a extended delay of, let's say, 2 days, 4 days, they may need to expedite that air freight in order to serve their supply chain. The carrier, the shipping company, has ships that are waiting. There's fuel being burned. So just this one particular problem statement has implications on every single party in the ecosystem and directly hitting their bottom line, right? So if we just make this, sort of just in time, or optimize this, let the ships arrive, even if they were going to arrive early, if they would have slow steamed, we've done the calculation for one ship, one port to port pair. If they would just slow steam by, let's say, 3 knots, that's about 75 tons of fuel saved. That's about $40,000 US for just that one port that they're going to. And this is possible if they knew making profits. So until there is optimization and then sustainability is an associated impact on that, it's very hard for an organization just to think about sustainability. So, but I really think and believe that it goes hand in hand. So visibility comes first, optimization comes second, and then you will definitely see that sustainability.
Makes sense. So thanks. So what I'm hearing is like there are financial pointers. Yeah, Raj, what?
Yeah, I think what Rod and Nidhi have said makes a lot of sense, right? We don't need to look far beyond what we are doing day in, day out, right? There are inefficiencies everywhere. There are things that we need to correct, that we need to sort out. There are small enablers. I'm saying small because it doesn't look like a big thing, the visibility, what you spoke about, right? It's an important one, extremely important one, right? You provide that, people are naturally savers, right? They'll find a way to save it. And as Rod had said, many times it doesn't come with a positive pull. It has to come with a negative push. Top down is the way to go. The moment the top down approach is really, really strong, people will find their ways to do it. For example, in India, there's so much of wastage on food, right? Where does it go? I mean, it's going to impact one way or the other in the end to the environment also, right? I mean, as I read some articles, it's like upwards of a third food items to waste, right? Why is it going waste? Visibility can be a great lever to sort the thing out. And so many people need the food. but it's not available. In some other places, it's getting rotten, it's getting thrown away, and all this. I think the great points, Rod and what you guys spoke of. I fully subscribe to it. And sustainability should have no cost, will not have a cost, right? Even in the short run. That's important for us to note. Yeah.
Makes sense. I think that's a great question. That's a great point. So what I'm hearing is that typically it's mostly the financial implications and the general consciousness of not looking forward like into the future that is preventing the industry from adopting. So would love to see what is the, do you have some active engagement programs? Again, Saurabh and Raj, from your conglomerates, like, do you have some active programs to foster sustainability? And what are how do you map those programs? What are some key drivers, like some key KPIs that you can look for to understand how those programs are performing? So yeah, Saurabh, you can go for it. Yeah, no worries.
So in terms of, I mean, as happens in every part of life, right? What doesn't get measured doesn't get done, right? So you have to have targets for everything. And as I mentioned, that sustainability has many dimensions within Maersk. So for every dimension, we are working with very specific targets, and those are part of our strategy. And those targets are often revised as well, right? So for example, 2018, I think, yeah, 2018 is when we came up with our decarbonization plan that by 2030 we will have the first vessel. By 2050 we will have all our fleet carbon neutral, right? Now we had to what we realized over the couple of years is that 2030 is too late. We will. There is a quota. Almost we are coming to reality that that there's a quota of emissions. And if we actually exhaust that quota in the next 10 years, then we are in already a desperate position. So it has to change, and then we brought forward that objective to 2023, and we are putting a lot of efforts right now. There is a very large team working with top scientists to actually come up with a vessel which can enable that in the next 2 years. There are quite a few programs where we bring together a multitude of parties to solve these problems, right? So one example is the Maersk McKinney Moller Institute. This is also something that is not very old. So 2019 is when we actually 2019 is when it was thought of, and 2020 is when it was launched. It's a neutral, it's not a Maersk entity. It's a neutral platform that brings together academics, large industry players, SMEs, startups. Everybody who's working on this agenda comes together, and there will be research done on what kind of fuels we will need, what kind of designs of vessels that we will need. How do we really go about decarbonizing shipping in the long run? So as I mentioned, it's really a process of engaging the parties. We are working very closely with our suppliers on these programs as well. In fact, one of the key criteria we're beginning to use for our suppliers is actually sustainability, how they are contributing towards it. So it's about creating that ecosystem to solve this massive problem that just cannot be solved by just throwing money.
Yeah, makes sense. What about you, Raj? Do you have an active engagement program for sustainability?
Yeah, overseas, I mean, we do have a program which is the reason why we are on the Dow Jones Index, right? Otherwise, we would not be there, right? The way we do it is a little more subtle, right? It's about creating the awareness, creating the sensitivity in the people who are doing day-to-day things, and making sure that they do things in a more sustainable manner, which is what really helps us. For example, with your help, we have been able to do away the documentation as element, right? We have been able to cut all the paperwork within the organization as far as supply vendor or relationship is concerned by a third, right? We don't need so many more papers now because most of the things is digitally done. Right? So when you have the right motivations to the people, people, we have seen that they react in a positive manner and are very supportive of this thing. And it's not only us, but also the vendors, right? Like Saurabh said, this ecosystem, right? You need a push a little bit, but then once they see the benefit, they really come on board very, very quickly. And in places like Southeast Asia, India, for example, they're happy to do it because the sensitivity to that element, not from an environment point of view, but from a cost point of view, is very high. For example, if you put a paperless way of dealing with things, people will really do it because they don't have access to printers in their offices. They have to go pay money to somebody to get the printouts done, right? Many a times. So that really is a big motivator for the people to do that, right? So it's about creating the awareness, creating the sensitivity to people, giving a little bit of push by telling the channel partners to adhere to it and facilitating them to deal with it, right? Just because I go and tell them that don't give me so many papers or don't print so many papers, but still, you still have to give me that information. That's not going to help. We need to enable the ecosystem to step in, contribute in a positive manner. That's how we do it at Glenmark. Yeah?
Oh, sorry, a counter question. So what happens if this engagement program that you have, it faces some sort of risks? How do you mitigate those risks? And they could be all kinds of nuances, like they could be cultural nuances. Let's say, people are not willing to adopt. So how do you solve that?
Yeah, so many a times it so happens that people, once they're aware, they're willing to come around, right? It's about appealing to their sensibilities, right? Many years back when I was in my college, one of the professors told us, right? The moment your organizational goal aligns to your personal goal, it works.
Okay.
The problem is many times they don't align to each other. That's where the challenge is, right? You have to find that common ground. You have to find that soft spot where you appeal to that, right? And that works. And many a times, more often than not, it works. And the people who come up, who are the vanguards, to start this thing, actually create the example for the others. And at the end, there are always 5%, 10% people who have resistance to change. But when they see the remaining people have moved on, they already moved on. Frankly speaking, I have not seen, I've worked in most of Asia, but I've not seen resistance to change anywhere here. Because when you move from anything in this world, there's a substantial step up you're already doing. It's not a step down if you fail. So people are happy to engage, people are happy to contribute.
I think like Rod, Alvin, Nidhi might have a different opinion on this. I personally from GoComet's angle as well. I think that there is fair amount of resistance to change, especially as you go into some very archaic or very large family-owned businesses. There is a big resistance to change. Rod, Alvin, Nidhi, what are your points on that? Like, especially related to sustainability. This theme, yeah.
Definitely. Just what I've experienced at HubTran when we're trying to just make a little impact that actually doesn't take a major change in the business. We see resistance. The fact that, of course, the old adage, I've always done it this way, so why should I change? Trying to convince people, make them understand a bigger picture as to why it will make an impact, or the cost of my labor to do that is small, therefore why should I bother? It's not just about the cost of your labor, which of course, if we do reduce that, you will increase your productivity, but it's more about sustainability. It's more about your contribution and us setting the right tone and the right example across an industry. And, in the freight forwarding industry, for example, we know the top 25 basically accommodate 50% of the entire global arena. So it's everyone else underneath, particularly the hundreds of thousands of small to mediums that we want to influence them, penetrate them, and make a change in that way. Because in that particular case, if the big guys are independent and they're fully serviced, they're not dealing with the smaller guys to actually influence them. So we need to get to the smaller guys in this particular industry to influence them. While at the same time, we're monitoring what the big guys are doing. All of the big guys, the DHL, the USAN, the ESV, they all have a sustainability program. But let's monitor just exactly how that percolates or distills down into some concrete actions and some concrete results.
Makes sense. Alvin, Nidhi, what do you think about this part? Like, this resistance to change aspect regarding sustainability. So people understand, okay, yeah, that makes sense. People understand the financial implications. But then again, right, in Asia, what do you think?
I mean, like at the very least for Rod, Tech Global, you guys are a huge company, right? And I think the kind of customers that you guys are dealing with, the DHLs of the world, they probably have additional resources, and of course, I think the sustainability angle. I think with this webinar as well, you can tell it's a very, very hot word now. But I think beyond hot, for the moms and pops, which I deal with on a day-to-day basis for the trucking companies, right? They really, it doesn't even float, it doesn't even come to them at all. I think so for us, essentially, we just put our actions into basically use actions, right? So we use by reducing carbon footprint. I think that's what a digital trucking platform, what we can do, reducing paper. And I think like it really takes giants to sort of get moving first, and the moms and pops really on the ground for you guys. If you guys really are interested to find out, I think in the rest of Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, you know, they are still on pen and paper. So I think that's how archaic things are in reality. And I think, you know, they really don't have any concept whatsoever in terms of sustainability. And I think the small boys really just have to wait for the big ones to take action and resistant to change. They are not even refusing to move from pen and paper to something online. So I think it says a lot. So I think that really is the situation.
So you haven't seen what happens in the West. Okay, from the resistance to change perspective. So let's keep it aside. Okay. Yeah.
Nidhi, what are your points?
Where I worked for you know, one of the large corporates in logistics, DHL, for a decade. Sustainability was always a big theme, but it was definitely lived as well. Sustainability in terms of CO2, in terms of and other aspects about diversity and you know, respect for things around you, etc. I think you know, as someone who's running a company, a you know, young startup now, I see my team being very sustainable. You know, we hardly use much paper. We are in a shared office space. There are glass bottles for water. People are all eating healthy. I think everyone kind of is living that sustainability. We actually work with corporates. So we work with the large, we're a B2B company. We work with some of the largest freight forwarders as well as manufacturers. I think they get the sustainability concept. I will come back to my point about sustainability needs to be part of a business case. For any kind of optimization, any kind of product that we're talking about, there needs to be an angle to sustainability, but it needs to be linked with a business case, with optimization, with a bottom line impact. And as a company, we do exactly that. We predict how the arrival time of cargo, we predict the demand of cargo. Both of these products that we have a direct impact on sustainability. And I think that's something that we talk about in a business case, you know, how it has an impact on optimizing capacity, optimizing asset relocation, but also sustainability. So I think that I mean, from that perspective, it definitely gets the ears. You know, corporates are definitely responding. I think they're hearing to that. I can understand with SMEs, it may be a different challenge, but ultimately it needs to be part of a business case. Otherwise, you know, if you and I, if we're running companies, we can talk about sustainability, but we wouldn't be ready to change things drastically just for the sake of sustainability. It needs to make business sense. So yeah, I think it comes down to like I said, business case, visibility, but also each of us individually has a role to play in the entire environment about, you know, how we're living our lives.
Makes sense. So last final question, guys, and then we can move to some Q&A from the audience. So final question is, let's say you want to foster a culture of sustainability and eco-friendly practices. Just like 2 pointers on how do you foster a culture, and it can be pertaining to your existing organization or in general, your customers and in business in general. So Saurabh, over to you. Like, how do you foster a culture?
I think it's fostering a culture is about having the right conversations. So I strongly believe in the conversations lead to action, action lead to culture. Right. So if you want to change the culture, you have to start at conversations, not at the action point of view, right? And then to drive the right conversations, that often comes from the leadership. That often comes from you know, what are the what is it on agenda? What is happening on cooler chats? you have to really make your organization believe that this is something important. And it's not, I mean, to be honest, it's not very difficult, because these are the things that affect each one of us individually. And it's not that difficult to touch that chord if you really want to move people to have that conversation and then move people to action. So that's where I would say is that we have to start at that level, make it something that you breathe in and out, right? I mean, for example, we have done a lot around this. I mean, around sustainable practices, also a safety, for example, right? Safety is something that we have included in every single conversation that we have at Maersk, and similarly in other organizations as well. And that these are the things that then you become so conscious about it that you don't even have to think about it, and that's where you have to that's where you have to aim for.
Makes sense. Perfect. What about you, Raj? What do you think? Cultural aspects.
Yeah, in terms of cultural aspect, one is I agree with what Saurabh had said. You have to talk, you have to keep communicating, you have to make sure you give that positive push to the people. But at the same time, you also have to set an example, right? You cannot just ask people to do it, right? You got to set an example. You got to share how you got to show to your own stakeholders in terms of the teams, your own teams, top management, your stakeholders all around you, how it's done. Then they will easily step in and follow. They will realize that this is something which you value, and they will start appealing to that. They will imbibe some of the practices, and they will start implementing it at their end. That's how I do it. For me, you said you do it by example. There's no other way apart from expressing, telling them, and leading it by example from yourself.
Makes sense. Rod, what do you think?
So I think you can address it from both sides. From the corporate side, you can have the corporate governance and incentives for the stakeholders and people in the organization to think in a sustainable way and to put those words into action. And then there's the consumer side of it, which I briefly mentioned before, being eco-conscious in their buying habits. In fact, there was a study done by New York University that found over the last 5 years that sustainably marketed products grew 7 times faster than conventional products. So, I believe that the awareness is there. And with younger people getting more involved in the stock market, that can also influence, it can be a direct message to companies in terms of are they happy with the way with their practices and what they're doing, etc. And it's not just this part of it. There's the social aspect of sustainability as well. Using child labor. All those aspects of it can come into play as well. And we've all seen that consumers can certainly speak with a click. And make their voices very heard, very loudly heard, very, very, very quickly. So I think it can come from both sides. The corporate end, it can also come from the end consumers, their buying habits and their cognizance around being eco-friendly and sustainable.
Makes sense. Alvin, what do you think?
I think culture always starts from the top, right? So for startups like yourself, me, Nidhi, I think what we do as startup founders is what we believe in. And I think when I first started Haulio, our vision is digitized across trucking for Southeast Asia. We see the gap where the paper part of things, moving them from paper to online. And obviously, I think our entire thesis of how we believe trucking should be minimize empty mileages and minimizing all this empty haulage. Quite proud, Maersk is actually one of our clients as well. And I think we play our part, our small little part. I was just saying earlier about the small, medium truckers, they are just busy with the day-to-day stuff. The drivers have more operational things to think about. I think what we are trying to do is we actually live and breathe our mission and our vision. So digitization of the entire haulage, container haulage space, and minimizing all these empty truck movements. So I think that's really a part of us formative as a startup, what we actually represent, what we stand for. And I think that essentially is a way that I naturally believe the rest of my company is a believer of sustainability, and that's how we can think we can play a little small role in this entire supply chain.
Nice. Nidhi, what about you? Cultural aspects. How do you foster that culture?
Yeah, I think so. Two things to that. One is how we as a team, as a company, follow those eco-friendly practices, and second, how we help our customers through our product. So we as a company, like I mentioned, we're in a shared space. We hardly use much paper, glass bottles, eating healthy. But I think it all comes down to the team being, really young. And I think I see that young people in general are more aware to, being following these sustainable practices. So it comes easy. I think in a small team like ours, every single person who enters the team changes the culture and dynamic of the team, and every single person brings it. If they bring in those sustainable practices, that's sort of creates those collaborative team effort to follow those. So I think we're kind of living that. There's always room for improvement, doing things in more eco-friendly manner. As a company, in the products that we provide to our customers, both from the predictive visibility as well as the demand prediction, I think eventually what we're doing is really giving the customers, enabling them to get visibility on sustainability. So getting to know what their real CO2 emissions are, where the inefficiencies are, what kind of capacity changes they would need to do. All of that has a direct impact on how the supply chain can be more sustainable. So I think that's something that we feel very proud about, and we actually talk about it in the team. So it's not just about building cool tech. It's not just about getting to work with these large marquee customers, but it's also about having an impact on the environment and the global supply chain. So I think that's kind of what motivates and drives us.
Thanks, Nidhi. So guys, over to questions. There are a fair few questions from the audience. So first is for Alvin. How to quantify the continual improvement made within the sustainability program? So any quantitative aspects? It's a tough one, man.
Sorry.
Okay, so
Can you repeat that?
The question is, how do you quantify some continual improvements made within the sustainability program?
Quantify.
Yeah.
Okay, so what it's a tough one. I mean, what we are trying to do over here, it's by trucks. So we deal with trucks, right? So we use kilometers sort of savings and traveled as a means to from a carbon emission standpoint. And I think that's internally as a company one of our KPIs as well. The more jobs we match, what sort of mileage are we saving from having the trucks moving empty haulage? So I think that's the part that we try to quantify. I think it's not the best way, but I think that's one of the ways that we do. So by kilometers traveled, and then from there we use a benchmark to tie in with. There was a data source that my team actually looked at in terms of carbon emission of trucks. But I think all things in consideration, right? I think we have the shipping lines here. I think in terms of kilometers saved per tonnage per tonnage move, I think trucks are actually still not the most significant. I think it's ocean freight is still the one that has the most carbon emissions. So I think that's how we do it. But yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Over to the second question is for Raj. So do you have an environmental management system in place? And if there is, then how consistent is it with the international standards?
For us, we do have a system process that's defined as per the system, and the monitoring and the audit happens as per that. For us, the philosophy is simple, right? Whatever we need to do in the market has to be locally relevant in the local market. Right? We cannot have a philosophy which is globally spread out, because we are present in more than 80 countries. So what we do in India has to abide by what Indian laws say. What is we do in US have to be abide by the US laws. That defines the core of the philosophy what we have. But when we look at the laws across the world, most of the laws are consistent with each other. They're not contradicting as far as environment impact is concerned, which is where life becomes a little bit easy for us. But yeah, we do have an EMS, and we also follow the policies, guidelines laid out by the local authorities to the T. Sure.
Makes sense. Thanks. The next question is for Saurabh. So do you require your contractors and suppliers to adhere to a code of conduct that helps them operationalize sustainability aspects for their businesses?
Absolutely. Absolutely, there is a code of conduct now. Now this is something that is evolving, right? So our code of conduct has always been around ethical practices, right? So we touched upon some of the things around bribery, child labor, all the things that we consider unethical from a point of view of our values. Those are definitely ingrained in every single contract that we sign, and there is a compliance team that makes sure that is always happening. Now, as we become more mature in our own thinking of sustainability, it is further expanding, and as I mentioned, we are beginning to look at environmental sustainability, carbon emissions, and so on for our suppliers as well. We are not 100% there yet, because as you know, we also operate in many markets with many different types of suppliers. So this is something that is also evolving. It has been we have already worked with it in some markets. In other markets, we'll be rolling it out slowly.
Makes sense. Okay, fair. So then there are a few more. So there is no one tested framework. How do you meet the leading indicators? And this is specifically for ROD. So yeah, so let me just repeat. So if there is no one tested framework and for probably deploying sustainability, how do you map and meet out the leading indicators while deploying a framework? So from what I understand, it's something like, if you're deploying a framework, and how do you know beforehand whether that framework is working and is in sync or not? Like, that's what it means.
Well, depending on your framework, you may not. But I mean, there's some things that companies can do at a very basic level that, and they can of course benchmark and look what other people are doing. But just in terms of reducing carbon emissions, you've got switching to renewable heat and power, boost energy efficiency, reducing waste and materials. So there's a number of basic aspects that or basic activities that companies can do to make an impact and as they build the framework. But I think if you're talking about maybe a broader framework, I mean, and there's a series of steps that some of which may be followed, or all of them may be followed, but basically having that emissions baseline and having that understood and articulated throughout a company, setting ambitious and holistic reduction targets. It can filter on a longer term basis into revisiting product design choices, their sourcing strategies, where they source from, or helping as I mentioned before, the suppliers become more efficient and more sustainable in terms of how they supply you. Particularly, again, I go back to automotive, where you've got thousands and thousands of suppliers. Working with them to not necessarily. Well, I guess you can play them off against each other, but giving incentive to those to be more efficient, that will also lead into the kind of procurement standards that you might have. Also, you can co-fund. You might want to co-fund some activities with your suppliers or with other organizations around your business. Using the big guys using scale, as I mentioned, 90% of the world's businesses are small to medium. The big guys using scale to promote green, lower cost green solutions, and then making those more available to people. And then just overall the internal governance that I mentioned, and then tracking that governance and making sure that it's adhered to.
Makes sense. So there's a few more. There is one for Saurabh. So do you see integrated management system to make sustainability a key component? And how do you know and how do you ensure that Maersk makes informed decisions? You want me to repeat? It's a bigger, like, people are asking like long questions. Anyway, so do you see, do you use an integrated management system to make sustainability a key component in your operations? So let's start with that first.
It's as I mentioned, that sustainability is a pretty wide topic, right? So definitely there are components of sustainability that are already part of our operating system today. I am a firm believer that, and I think as Nidhi had also mentioned, right, first battle to be won here is really about creating that visibility, right? So when you have your targets around sustainability, it's important to create visibility around how well you are doing to achieve those. Where is it that you are lacking? And once that becomes clear, then it becomes part of your integrated management system to really achieve. That's how I see it in terms of sustainability. It has to. It doesn't have to stay at a sustainability level. It's not a target that the sustainability team has to deliver. It has to become part of your own management of the entire company. That's the only way to go.
Tools, are you using any kind of systems to manage that? Like, for example, you have ERP for managing your internal accounts, audits, etc., internal supply chains. Do you have any integrated management system to manage sustainability goals that you have? You don't need to name it, but do you have a system in place?
As I mentioned, that there are goals in place, right? So there are goals in place which do end up in our operating system, which do enter our ERP. So there is no separate system that maintains that goal, and since it's very tied up with our overall strategy, I mentioned, like, for example, safety. It's a very important part of sustainability. Ethical practices. It's very important part of sustainability. All these things are very much part of the entire way Maersk operates. And in our ERP, there are targets around everything. Right. So with that in mind, I think it's something, as I mentioned, that there are things that are already in there. There are things that will come in the future. Carbon footprint is one of them, which is slowly making its way into everything that we do as well.
Makes sense. Okay. And the second part of that question is, how does Maersk make informed decisions related to sustainability? So, yeah.
It's I think it's again coming back to the culture part. Yeah. Right. So once it's decision making is like, all decisions are not made at the executive level, right? So there are these decisions being made at all the levels, and that having sustainability at core of all those decisions can only happen when the culture is already around it. And for that culture to be in place, it has to start with at the top with the right conversations, and that leads to the right actions. And it's something that is ever since the first day I've joined Maersk, all these topics, not saying that this is our sustainability agenda and here's the presentation for it, as part of how we do business. All these points are discussed. All these points are introduced, making sure that everything that we do involve these things, and that's the way of making sure it's integrated with your culture.
Makes sense. Thanks. Next question is in general for everyone, but and I think it's more pertaining to Nidhi. That's what the person has asked. So basically, when you talk about when you're basically pitching to an import-export company or any customer or a shipping line or a freight forwarder, you resonate at the top, right, about the sustainability goals or in general visibility or in general predictive analysis, right? But how does that thinking trickle down to the user level? Because ultimately, those are the people who have to, kind of upload and use your product. I think we also say we are also in the same boat. But yeah, would love to know your views. I think the users want to know. Yeah.
So you mean, how do you get them to change from their existing processes?
How do you get them to change processes, and how do you change the thinking?
Yeah, I think ultimately, okay, two things. One is to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the person, the importer exporter, and understand how your tool is actually going to change their lives, how it's going to ease their time, or the pain they're feeling in whatever work that they're doing, or what the tool is enabling. I think that's the first thing. Is what you're selling or the tool that you're talking about is actually changing the life of that person, because then it's going to be an easier conversation. Then it's going to be an easier conversation, not just about sustainability, but about how that impacts their life or work every day. And then I think the second thing is to show the impact. So, have them sort of try it out, and then let's say after a week or after a month, show them what the impact was. Because once you see the numbers, like again, if you're doing that day in, day out, you may not realize the impact it's having. But if there is a way to, sort of again, in hindsight, provide that visibility, okay, this is how much the impact has been of using this tool on, just sustainability, or the hours saved, or the bottom line dollar value, that then makes the person more confident to change their way of what they've done for 30 years. Yeah, change management is always a hard topic, but I think, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else who'd like to jump in on what just Nidhi said? Perfect. So cool. So last question. Oh, this is for me. So what role can technology play to achieve sustainability? Okay, so technology can play a lot of roles. So it starts with some fundamental aspects, right? How it can optimize any processes, because whatever technology you build in, it has to talk something about the bottom line, especially in the area of logistics, which is essentially a cost center for a lot of enterprises. So it has to start with talking about the impact on the bottom lines. And then it should eventually give the higher up some idea about how it is impacting using those cost savings, how it is impacting carbon emissions, how it is impacting reduced paper, etc. And as GoComet now, we have a lot of these aspects integrated very in our platform, in our entire platform. So to talk about some sustainability led issues. So I think that's a bit about technology. Anyone else would like to jump in on this one? Cool. So I think that's it, guys. I think I'd just like to conclude. Any parting thoughts, anyone? Rod, Alvin, Nidhi, Raj, Saurabh, anything that you'd like to say towards the end? I think we're towards the end of the webinar.
Yeah, maybe for me, parting one is that I think thanks for organizing this. I think what really matters at the end of the day is like we all do our part, right? And I think technology, to add on to your point earlier, will definitely play a big role in terms of how this is done. I think on our side of things, one thing that I've totally forgot, because just now Rod was just talking about electric vehicles and stuff like that. I think that is really exciting, how we can electrify the industry from moving from that means alternative fuels and alternative sources of energy. At least on a trucking standpoint, it's going to be super exciting. I think before we talk about autonomous, that's really the gap between now to fully autonomous vehicles is coming up. I think just got a news that Maersk also joined around for this Swedish startup that is doing autonomous vehicle. I just read it. So I think we're moving into this very exciting world. And sustainability becomes a natural part of how supply chain is going to change in the future and the years ahead. So yeah, that's my parting statement.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would concur with Alvin. I mean, technology is definitely is going to lead and help lead people in this activity. That's the reason why I'm so interested in looking at different technologies, no matter how mature they are at this point in time, and even if they're just making a little dent in an organization. And again, as I've mentioned, I've been very focused on freight forwarding and trade, etc., over the last few years. But just seeing areas where we make a change and get that change ubiquitous enough such that it really starts to make an impact across the world. Because with the continuing growth of e-commerce and international trade generally, it's going to, the supply chains are going to become more and more congested, more and more complex. So we need, at any rate, to become more efficient. There's so much wastage in the supply chain that we can reduce and do something about, and make things lots and lots more sustainable.
Thanks. Makes sense. Nidhi, what about you? Any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're in a very exciting industry. We're sort of at this inflection point in supply chain, which is going to digitize quite massively in the next couple of years. So it's truly an exciting time. This industry, I think, has kind of truly seen its need and urgency. I think, like we've said, each of us has a role to play in this ecosystem in order to make the industry more efficient, but ultimately just get all of our goods faster and cheaper and on time. And through that, I'm hopeful that every single thing that we're doing is having an impact on sustainability.
Thanks. Raj.
Yeah, I think we're at an inflection point. That's right. Things are changing from the old way of doing things, everything on paper. We use blockchain and all the technology to find a way to get everything digitized. I think that has to happen not only at a large scale, where we have a top-down push and everything, but also at an individual level. We need to be able to find that common ground. We need to be able to find that soft corner where we appeal to the people and people start making those changes, right? Because the inefficiencies that we're talking about, these big ticket changes would not address them, right? They would still continue to be there. You would still probably use alternative fuels, but with the same level of inefficiencies going on. So we've got to find those things which we have to address, and we can address at the bottom of the pyramid level. We don't need to be at the top of the pyramid process. We have to create that sensitivity around that. And I think I'm very hopeful, I'm very confident the human race is going to live for long, right? It's not going to vanish one day because of some issues like this. I'm sure we'll find ways together as we go along.
Thank you. That is indeed positive. Saurabh, what about you?
Firstly, thanks a lot, the GoComet team, for organizing this and putting together this really exciting panel. I had a lot of fun and really learned a lot. I have to say, it's exciting as all of you concur. It's exciting times for our industry. It's also challenging times ahead for us. So let's see how the next few years evolve. There is a lot to be done, and all of us will play a very important part in really bringing this thinking forward. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. So fun final, I think, conclusion from our end. I think whenever any change takes place in the world, right, and how products are diffused, it takes approximately the same amount for diffusing it in the 1 or 2% in the remaining 98%. And I think that this is what the inflection point is. Like probably we are, honestly, whatever we are talking about, people who are listening in, we are talking about just the 1 and 2%, right? And if we are able to diffuse it in the 1 and 2%, the remaining 98% will follow in approximately the same time. Probably it takes 2 years to diffuse in the top 2%. The next 2 years it will take to diffuse in 98%, because all of us can see that this is the future. This is not just the future. This is the only way out, right? You have to do it, whether you like it or not, whether it's cheap or not, and it has to come from the top. So I'm really, really hopeful that, we will pass beyond these cultural nuances. We'll pass beyond these financial nuances and understand that this is the only way out. So I'm hoping that we are at the 2% and remaining 2% can happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think 2030, we'll be talking about, sustainability done, what next? So thanks a lot, guys, for joining in. I hope you had a good time.